This is the story of a 13-year Joe Gibbs Racing insider who got sued for allegedly stealing the crown jewels and then turned around and filed one of the most explosive countersuits NASCAR has ever seen. Chris Gabehart just flipped JGR's entire lawsuit on its head, and the details buried in these new filings are absolutely wild. So let's get into it. Back in February, Joe Gibbs Racing dragged its former competition director Chris Gabehart into court, claiming he stole trade secrets and carried them straight to rival team Spire Motorsports. JGR's complaint put the damages north of $8 million, with doubled damages and attorney's fees stacked on top of that, and called the whole thing a brazen scheme to steal their most sensitive information. That was the version of events JGR wanted the public to hear. But on June 24, 2026, Gabehart and Spire fired back with countersuits of their own, and what those filings describe looks nothing like the story JGR told. Before we unpack the countersuit bombshells, you need to understand who Chris Gabehart actually is and why his departure rattled every shop in the NASCAR garage. Gabehart earned a mechanical engineering degree from Purdue in 2005, but racing ran in his blood long before college. His grandfather, Al Straub, raced NASCAR in the 1960s and 70s, and Gabehart himself won the 2004 ARCA CRA Super Series Rookie of the Year award before capturing the 2007 CRA Super Series Championship and the All-American 400 in 2008. He joined JGR in 2012 as a race engineer, climbed to Xfinity Series crew chief where he racked up 9 wins, and then landed the job that changed his career in 2019, crew chief of Denny Hamlin's number 11 Cup car. Their very first race together produced a Daytona 500 victory, and they won it again in 2020, back-to-back. 22 Cup wins came across 6 seasons, including those 2 Daytona 500s and the 2021 Southern 500, along with 3 straight Championship 4 appearances. That pairing ranked among the most successful crew chief and driver combinations in the sport. On November 22, 2024, JGR promoted Gabehart to competition director, which sounds like a reward on the surface. According to Gabehart, what he received looked nothing like what he signed up for. He says the promise was a COO-type role, overseeing all competitive operations, but the reality came with far less autonomy and a whole lot of pressure to become Ty Gibbs's crew chief. And that's where the family dynamics blow this whole thing wide open. Gabehart's countersuit pulls 0 punches. The filing states, and these are the actual words from the legal document, that JGR elevated nepotism over competitive excellence when it installed the grandson of JGR's owner as the number 54 car's driver, instead of re-signing the driver that had won multiple Cup Series championships for JGR. That driver they're referencing is Kyle Busch. The filing goes on to say, Gabehart understandably didn't want to babysit a neophyte driver, but quickly learned that was the role JGR expected him to take on. Those are fighting words in any context, but especially in a court filing. Now here's where things escalate to a different level. According to the countersuit, on or about March 27, 2025, Heather Gibbs, who is the co-owner of JGR and the mother of Ty Gibbs, wrote Chris Gabehart a personal check for $500,000. That payment showed up on a 1099-NEC from an entity called Ty Gibbs Racing LLC, classified as non-employee compensation. Gabehart's filing says this check fell outside of his employment agreement and had nothing to do with his duties as competition director. He frames it as a direct attempt to push him into performing crew chief services for the number 54 car, and his filing describes the position it put him in as untenable. Refuse the money and risk permanently destroying his relationship with ownership, or accept it and keep juggling the Gibbs family's personal wishes against the company's best competitive interests. $500,000 on a personal check. That detail alone tells you how tangled this situation became. By November of 2025, the relationship had crumbled. On November 6th, Gabehart sat down with Joe Gibbs and asked for carte blanche authority over all racing decisions. Gibbs turned him down, and both sides agreed it was time to go separate ways. 2 days later, on November 8th, JGR's own CFO Tim Carmichael sent Gabehart a text message that read, quote, "I don't believe your actual role was what coach said it would be and what you were told you would have." That admission came from JGR's own chief financial officer in writing, and it lines up squarely with Gabehart's version of how things went down. But here's the thing, JGR says the real betrayal happened before that meeting. Their version of events puts Gabehart on his team laptop on November 7th, connected to JGR's network for 15 minutes, snapping at least 20 photos of his screen. The files he allegedly photographed included a 141-page post-race data analysis from a 2025 Las Vegas race, over 20 setup and simulation files, engine outputs, gear shift points, tire management processes, complete team payroll, driver pay figures, sponsor revenues, and pit crew analytics. Gabehart handed in his laptop on November 10th, and JGR formally terminated him for cause on February 9th, 2026. Does Gabehart deny taking those photos? He does not. His attorney, Kerry Davis, told the court, quote, "Is he proud of it? No. He's embarrassed. He regrets it. He knows it was stupid, and he knows that it's the reason that he's in this situation." And this is where the whole case pivots. Gabehart and Spire draw a hard line between taking the photos and sharing anything with anyone, and the judge appears to see that distinction too. Gabehart paid out of his own pocket for an independent forensic audit, and it came back completely clean. His filing states there were no text messages, no email attachments, no dissemination whatsoever. JGR's own court-ordered forensic exams turned up the exact same result. Nothing transmitted, not one file moved anywhere. Spire even offered to open its own computers and files for forensic examination. Gabehart's filing says JGR ignored that offer, quote, because it wanted a lawsuit more than the truth. The countersuit doesn't stop there. Gabehart alleges JGR unilaterally cut off his earned wages back in November of 2025, months before his February termination, and his filing calls it a calculated pressure tactic designed to coerce him into compliance during separation negotiations. On top of that, he claims JGR's forensic examiner handed over dozens of his privileged attorney-client communications to JGR's legal team, completely outside the court-ordered protocol. He cites potential violations under North Carolina computer trespass statutes and the state's Unfair and Deceptive Trade Practices Act. Then comes the Cheddar-Smith situation, which adds a whole separate layer to this fight. Spire filed its own counterclaim alleging that JGR recruited Spire's car chief Robert Cheddar Smith in 2025 to work on the number 54 for Ty Gibbs. Smith was still under a Spire non-compete at the time, but Spire agreed to release him under what they describe as an implied player-to-be-named later trade. The deal was straightforward. JGR would either release a JGR employee of Spire's choosing or pay Spire $100,000. Smith started working at JGR in April of 2025, which meant JGR got exactly what it wanted. Spire then asked for crew chief Tyler Allen, and JGR refused. Spire asked for car chief Ryan Towles, and JGR refused again. That $100,000 in cash? Never paid either. Spire's filing calls it a material breach of the agreement. Spire's attorney Lawrence Cameron put it bluntly in his statement to the court, quote, "It's really easy to make an allegation, and frankly, it's been disappointing in this case the way that Joe Gibbs Racing has made these extreme allegations without backing it up with any actual evidence." Gabehart's countersuit uses even sharper language, calling the entire JGR case, quote, "nothing more than a smear campaign designed to punish an employee for daring to leave, and a calculated campaign to exact retribution and create a public spectacle." Spire also pointed out a competitive irony that undercuts JGR's entire damage argument. As of 2026, JGR sits in the top 5 in points, with both Hamlin and Ty Gibbs performing well. Tyler Reddick at 23-11, a JGR Technical Alliance team, led the standings. Spire's argument comes down to simple logic. If JGR's confidential information were truly that valuable and that vulnerable, you would expect to see JGR suffering competitively, not thriving at the top of the board. So where does everything stand right now? Federal Judge Susan Rodriguez in the Western District of North Carolina found that JGR is likely to succeed on its claim that Gabehart misappropriated data because, again, the man admitted to taking the photos. But she also found that JGR has not identified a single trade secret that Spire has actually misappropriated. Gabehart can keep working at Spire under the current ruling, just not in a competition director-style role for 18 months. The countersuits sit on file waiting for JGR's response, and the full case heads to trial in January of 2027. What started as JGR trying trying to protect its crown jewels has turned into a full-blown legal war, with Gabehart and Spire now playing offense, painting a picture of a team that prioritized family loyalty over merit and then went after the guy who wouldn't go along with the program. Whether the court buys that version of events, we'll find out at trial. One thing is clear though, this case is going to change how NASCAR teams think about non-competes, trade secrets, and what happens when a key employee decides to walk out the door. If you got something out of this breakdown, drop a like and subscribe so you catch the next update when JGR files its response. This story is a long way from over,